Have you ever imagined how a single phrase, said jokingly, can be the beginning of the downfall of someone who thought they were untouchable? Have you ever stopped to think that sometimes the quickest moment of your day can carry consequences capable of changing an entire life? Stay with me for a few minutes, because what you're about to discover may surprise you more than you imagine. Imagine an elevator. A small enclosed space, too silent to hide any tension. The doors slowly close, the number of floors begins to rise, and inside are people from completely different worlds. On one side, a billionaire accustomed to being served, respected, and feared. A man surrounded by status, power, and money, with the relaxed body of someone who believes that nothing and no one can reach him. On the other, a black woman, discreet, with a firm posture and attentive gaze, but who, in his eyes, seemed just another invisible presence, someone who didn't deserve even a second of consideration. The social contrast is immediate. He speaks loudly, takes up space, exudes self-confidence. She remains silent, observing, sensing the atmosphere. The elevator ascends, and with it grows that strange, almost palpable feeling that something is about to happen. Perhaps you have experienced something similar, that instant when the air changes, the atmosphere becomes heavy, and you feel that an invisible line is about to be crossed. Have you ever been through this? Then comes the joke, a phrase uttered with contempt, disguised as humor. A comment laden with prejudice, designed to elicit easy laughs and reaffirm a supposed superiority. The billionaire cracks the joke as if expecting no reaction, as if believing that money protects him from any consequences. A crooked smile appears on his face, a restrained laugh echoes from someone who didn't know how to react. But then, silence. A heavy, uncomfortable, almost deafening silence. The black woman doesn't respond. She doesn't argue back. She doesn't explain herself. She only raises her gaze slightly. And in that simple gesture, something changes. There is no explicit anger, no humiliation returned at that moment. There is control. There is dignity. There is a silent force that the billionaire doesn't perceive, but which begins to move there. The elevator continues to ascend, but it seems that time slows down. Each second weighs heavily. Each breath becomes shorter. You might be thinking, it's just another story of everyday humiliation. But that's exactly where the mistake lies. Because some situations don't end when the elevator doors open. Some seemingly small scenes are, in fact, the trigger for unexpected twists. What seemed like just a meaningless joke begins to take on a much greater significance. While the billionaire straightens his jacket, self-assured, and prepares to leave as if nothing had happened, that woman remains there, silent, guarding something he can't even imagine. And it is at this point that the story begins to spiral out of his control, because the contempt he cast in that closed space didn't stay confined within those walls. He planted something, and days later, he would begin to reap it in a way he never imagined. Stay with me until the end of this story, because what happens after this encounter will challenge everything you think about power, status, and justice. And before moving on, tell me, what if that woman was exactly who he would never have imagined? And while that scene still echoes in your mind, perhaps you're feeling something difficult to explain, a mixture of indignation, identification, maybe even memories of moments when silence was the only possible response to humiliation. Because in some way, we've all been in an elevator like that. Not necessarily made of metal and mirrors, but in situations where we were judged, underestimated, or treated as if we were nobody. And that's why this story matters. It's not just about an arrogant billionaire or a cruel joke. It's about real people, about unseen wounds, about eyes that carry entire stories. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. Perhaps a similar experience, perhaps a feeling you've never been able to put into words. Your voice here isn't just a comment. It connects, strengthens, and shows you that you're not alone. Meanwhile, if this narrative has already captivated you, if this type of story moves you and makes you reflect, consider liking the video. This simple gesture helps much more than it seems because it allows this message to reach other people who also need to hear stories like this. People who may, at this very moment, be carrying a silence similar to that of the woman in the elevator. And if you feel you want to continue following stories like this, tales of poetic justice, unexpected twists, and moments when the world seems to align in surprising ways, subscribing to the channel is a way to walk alongside us. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content, keeping alive stories that inspire, warn, and transform. Now take a deep breath, because what began with a joke and an awkward silence is only the beginning. Outside that elevator, decisions were about to be made, paths were about to cross again, and someone who thought they were in complete control of their own fortune would begin to realize that not all power is measured in money. And it is precisely from there that this story takes on even more unexpected dimensions. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding who he thinks he is and who she really is completely changes how this story makes sense. It's not just about a rich man and a woman in silence inside an elevator. It's about mindset, about decisions accumulated over a lifetime, and the dangerous illusion that power creates when no one says no anymore. This billionaire wasn't born there. He built his fortune with a mix of extreme ambition, opportune moments, and an almost absolute belief that the world works in favor of those with enough money. Over the years, he learned that doors open before they're even touched, that people laugh at unfunny jokes, and that mistakes can be swept under the rug with a well-signed check. This shapes someone's mind in a silent and profound way. Gradually, respect ceases to be something earned and becomes something demanded. Empathy is replaced by convenience, and the feeling of impunity grows like a shadow that no one else notices, except those outside this circle. He walks like he belongs everywhere. He talks like he's never been interrupted. He looks at people as if he's quickly classifying them: useful, disposable, irrelevant. For him, that elevator was just another passageway. The woman inside was just another unimportant face. And it is precisely at this point that the hidden truth of this story lies. He didn't see her because he never learned to see beyond his own certainties. She, on the other hand, carries something that makes no noise. She doesn't flaunt, she doesn't impose, she doesn't need to prove anything at that moment. Her posture is firm, but calm. Her gestures are restrained, calculated, almost as if each movement had been thought out before it even happened. When the joke comes, she doesn't react impulsively. Not because she didn't feel it, she did, and deeply, but because she has learned, throughout her own journey, that some reactions reveal more about the person reacting than about the person provoking. There's something in her gaze that doesn't match submission. A silent confidence, difficult to explain. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. Awareness of herself, of her own worth, of her own path. Anyone who observes carefully notices that calmness is not weakness, it's mastery. And this begins to create an uncomfortable, almost invisible contrast between the two worlds that crossed paths there. By chance, while he believes he's at the absolute top, she walks like someone who knows the inner workings, like someone who has witnessed power struggles firsthand, who understands how decisions are made away from the spotlight, who knows that status is fragile when based solely on appearances. And perhaps that's why she doesn't need to say a single word, because her true strength lies not in immediate responses, but in the impact yet to come. This difference in mindset is what makes it all the more intriguing. He thrives on the reactions of others. She thrives on her own truth. He feeds on external validation. She seems not to depend on it. And the more you observe this dynamic, the more you begin to realize that this apparent simplicity hides something much bigger, something that is not revealed in loud pronouncements, but in silent choices. There's a transformation happening there, even if no one has noticed yet. Not a visible transformation, but an internal one. The kind of change that begins before any great revelation, before any fall or upheaval. It's as if destiny is slowly rearranging the pieces, preparing the ground for decisions that will have real consequences. And perhaps the most unsettling part of this story is precisely this. While he exits the elevator believing that everything ended there, she continues on with the certainty that nothing has ended. Because some situations are not resolved the moment they happen. They accumulate, they gain weight, they create an impact. And when they return, they don't ask permission. All of this raises a silent question which is beginning to echo now. Who really has control when no one is watching? Who dictates the rules when the roles are reversed away from appearances? That's what this story begins to revolve around from here, when what seemed small begins to connect to something much bigger, much deeper, and impossible to ignore. And before moving forward on this journey, write in the comments, does this make sense to me? Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it's precisely here that the story begins to take a turn. Not explosively, not with immediate headlines or public scandals, but in that quiet way that usually precedes major falls. In the days following that seemingly banal encounter in the elevator, the billionaire continues his routine, believing that everything remains under control. The same full schedule, the same high-level commitments, the same conviction that the world still revolves at the pace he dictates. At least that's what he thinks. At first, the change seems too small to cause concern. An important contract that was practically closed is postponed without clear explanations. A long-time investor, one of those who always answered the phone on the first ring, asks for more time to reassess scenarios. Nothing serious, he tells himself. Fluctuations are part of the game. They always have been. But there's something different this time. A subtle, almost imperceptible detail that begins to bother him. The lack of justification. As the days go by, the signs accumulate. Strategic meetings are cancelled at the last minute. Partnerships considered solid begin to cool. Lawyers urge caution. Consultants speak of risks that had never been mentioned before. And little by little, that feeling of absolute control begins to give way to something he is not used to feeling: uncertainty. The phone rings less, and when it does, the conversations are shorter, more evasive, full of generic phrases. The timing isn't ideal. We need to align internally. We'll get back to this later. He tries to maintain a confident demeanor, but inside, his mind won't stop. The mindset that has always been based on control begins to crack, because when money stops obeying, everything built upon it begins to crumble. The nights grow longer, the sleep lighter. For the first time in a long time, he revisits past decisions, recalls conversations, tries to identify where he went wrong. And almost without realizing it, the memory takes him back to that elevator, to that silence, to that look he dismissed as irrelevant. The memory arises uncomfortably, like a question without an answer. It doesn't make sense, he thinks. There can't be a connection, but the doubt has already been planted. This is how fear usually arises, not as immediate panic, but as a succession of small impacts that erode security from within. The hidden truth begins to insinuate itself in the background of his own mind. And the more he tries to find rational explanations, the more everything seems to slip away. The numbers no longer respond as before. Connections seem to unravel without warning. Fortune, which has always been synonymous with power, begins to show its fragility. There's a transformation happening there, though he still resists admitting it. An internal change forced by circumstances. For the first time, he's not reacting arrogantly, but cautiously. He observes too much. He speaks less. He questions what he never questioned before, because when the impact starts to hit his wallet, his mindset needs to adjust, even if by force. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, far from the spotlight, life continues at a seemingly normal pace. No celebrations, no public announcements, no actions that would reveal any connection to what is happening. Just decisions being made, discrete movements, gears turning outside his field of vision. It is in this contrast that the story gains depth, because what seems too much like a coincidence begins to sound like a consequence. Perhaps you've heard someone say that the universe collects, not hastily, not angrily, but precisely. And that's exactly the feeling that begins to set in, as if an invisible debt were being collected in silent installments, without warning, without the possibility of negotiation. Each lost contract, each ignored call, each closed door adds weight to a bill he didn't even know existed. He still has no answers, only questions, and that, for someone used to being in charge, is deeply destabilizing. The journey that begins here is not just financial, it's psychological. A slow descent towards a revelation that hasn't yet fully shown itself, but is already beginning to take shape on the horizon, because when control slips from one's hands, something bigger is usually about to be revealed. And before we move on with this reflection, comment below, "I'm on this journey too." Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it is here that everything that seemed scattered begins to align in an almost disconcerting way. The reunion doesn't happen in just any place, nor is it casual. It occurs in an environment where decisions are made, where the fate of companies, people, and fortunes is shaped far from the eyes of the common public. A large, cold room organized to convey authority. A meeting that, for him, should have been just another attempt to stem losses, regain control, and understand the behind-the-scenes aspects of what was happening in his own journey. He enters confidently, but only outwardly. Inside, he is no longer the same. The previous days have left invisible marks. His body is there, well-dressed, posture erect, but his mind is in constant alert. Every face in the room seems to carry information he doesn't possess. Every silence rings louder than any word. And then, the moment everyone settles in, something happens that completely redefines the atmosphere. She goes inside. There is no dramatic announcement, no imaginary soundtrack, just the presence. The same black woman from the elevator, the same unwavering gaze, the same calm posture. But now the context changes everything. She doesn't sit just anywhere. She occupies the central space. People recognize her. They greet her with genuine respect. The atmosphere in the room instantly adjusts, as if everyone knows something important is about to be said. It is at this moment that the shock occurs. Not an explosive shock, but one that paralyzes. Time seems to slow down again, just like in that elevator. Only now there's no way to ignore it. There's no way to pretend not to see. The hidden truth reveals itself without needing to be announced aloud. It is the ultimate authority, directly responsible for decisions that have crossed his path in recent days. His mind tries to keep up, but it takes time to accept it. The pieces fall into place too quickly, and that hurts. The embarrassment is immediate. An absolute silence fills the room. No nervous laughter, no exaggerated reaction, only the heavy conscience of what was done, what was said, what was underestimated. He feels his face heat up, his stomach clench, not just from fear of financial loss, but from the belated realization of who she always was, and who he thought she was. She speaks calmly, a firm voice, without apparent resentment. Each word carries decisions already made, impacts already, and calculated paths already chosen. There is no explicit revenge. There is no need for that. The power is not in the tone, it is in the position. It is in the fact that now he listens. And he listens in silence, Because when the truth prevails, there is no room left for arguments. What's most striking is that she doesn't mention the elevator. She doesn't bring up the joke. She doesn't expose the humiliation. She doesn't need to. The transformation has already happened within him. The lesson doesn't come as an attack, but as a mirror. He sees himself as small for the first time in a long time, not just financially, but morally. And this realization has an impact that no amount of money can buy or prevent. Power shifts sides there, without applause, without unnecessary public embarrassment, just with presence, consistency, and authority built over a journey he never bothered to imagine. The room understands. Eyes meet. Everyone knows something historic is happening, even without grand words. It's the kind of revelation that redefines trajectories. For him, everything takes on a new meaning. The decisions of the last few days, the lost contracts, the distant investors, the closed doors. Nothing was random. Nothing was personal. It was a consequence, a sequence of choices that now reveal themselves in a new light. The mentality of impunity dissolves in seconds, and the silence that was once imposed on it now completely envelops him. But this story isn't over yet, because every great revelation is just the beginning of something even deeper. There are behind-the-scenes events that haven't yet come to light, impacts that continue to unfold, and an internal journey he will still have to face, far from that room. Her presence was the visible turning point. What comes next? That changes everything in an even more intense way. Before moving on, leave a comment. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it's at this point that the story ceases to be merely an external twist and begins to reveal something much more intimate, almost inevitable. Poetic justice doesn't come with fanfare. It settles in slowly, like an echo that can no longer be ignored. After that meeting, nothing is ever the same for him again, not because someone publicly humiliated him, not because he was exposed in headlines, but because the image he built of himself begins to crumble from the inside out. The consequences unfold in layers. First, the reputation. That name that once opened doors now carries an invisible weight. Invitations stop arriving. Advice that once sought him out now keeps a strategic distance. In the corridors where his presence was synonymous with influence, a cautious silence arises. People don't confront him, but they also no longer surround him. It's a subtle, almost polite isolation, and precisely for that reason, all the more painful. In the financial field, the losses are consolidating, not as an immediate collapse, but as a constant depletion. Projects are restructured without him. Holdings are reduced. Decisions are made without consultation. He realizes that power is not just accumulated capital, but sustained trust, and that when broken, cannot be rebuilt with numbers. Every past choice takes on a new meaning. Every arrogant attitude, every normalized disdain returns to his memory like a belated debt. And then comes the most difficult moment, the internal confrontation. Alone, far from the imposing halls, he revisits that scene in the elevator countless times, no longer with arrogance, but with shame. He realizes that the humiliation he inflicted was not a one-off lapse, but a reflection of a mindset built up over time, a mindset that confused success with superiority, authority with a license to disrespect. The hidden truth finally imposes itself. The problem was never her. It was always him. The apology, when it happens, is neither public nor performative. It's late, discreet, almost insecure. It carries more of a need for relief than an expectation of forgiveness. He understands, albeit incompletely, that some words don't undo impacts, don't erase journeys, don't rewrite what happened behind the scenes. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson. Not every fall exists to destroy. Some exist to teach. But learning is costly when it takes too long to see. On the other side, she moves on. Without celebrations, without triumphal speeches, Poetic justice doesn't transform her into a villain or a caricatured heroine. She remains whole. Her strength lies not in what she took, but in what she never needed to prove. Her journey is made of firm decisions, consistent presence, and a mindset that doesn't depend on the validation of those who once ignored her. The impact she generated wasn't just financial, it was symbolic, a silent reminder that respect is not optional and social awareness is not a trend, it's fundamental. This story is touching because it exposes something universal. No one is too small to be disrespected, and no one is too great to not fall. Power shifts, money circulates, status fluctuates, but choices remain, and at some point they return, not as revenge, but as a consequence. Poetic justice acts like this, without haste, without spectacle, without exceptions. Perhaps that's why this narrative is so thought-provoking, because it forces us to look inward and silently ask ourselves which elevators we ride through every day, which jokes we normalize, which silences we ignore. True transformation begins in this discomfort, in that instant when the other person's story intersects with our own journey. And when that happens, something moves, something changes, something demands continuity. Write in the comments, "This makes sense to me." If you've made it this far, it's because this story has truly resonated with you. Perhaps silently, perhaps awakening memories, reflections, or even discomforts that are part of our own journey. And it's precisely this kind of conversation that gives meaning to this space. If you feel that this content has added something to you, that it has brought a new way of seeing respect, power, and choices, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to stay close to stories that provoke, connect, and leave lasting marks. If you want, leave a comment saying you watched until the end. You can write something like, "This message was for me," or "I'm with you until the end." This helps create a real sense of connection, of people who aren't just watching but feeling along with you. And if at any point you recognized yourself here, liking the video is a discreet way of saying that this conversation was worthwhile. There's a video over here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into this reflection. Click on it and continue reading with me there.